Colossians 1:10 says, so that you may live worthily of the Lord and please Him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good deed, growing in the knowledge of God. So, in the previous verse, Paul said that Paul prayed that they will be filled with the knowledge of God's will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, and it's not telling you for what reason here. It says, so that you may live worthily of the Lord and please Him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good deed, growing in the knowledge of God. The prayer is for those Christians to be filled with the knowledge of the will of God in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. The goal is not knowledge as an end in itself, or wisdom to boast about, or understanding to compare oneself with others. Rather, it is to walk worthy of the Lord, to have a pattern of life that manifests who God is. So it's not knowledge for the sake of knowledge, wisdom for the sake of wisdom, understanding for the sake of understanding, but some a life that is lived lined up, like in line with God's will, in line with God's word, and then will so that we'll bear fruit in every good deed and we'll be growing. But that is easier said than done. That is why Paul was not just wishing it to happen. It was not browbeating those believers, giving them the ultimatum to shape up or they will no longer be Christians. He was not giving them a performance ultimatum. He prayed for them. He connects with God's point of view regarding those Christians, and that moved him to pray. He did not just provide them with a list of do's and don'ts, but he prayed. Have you ever tried something that another person said worked for them? I'm moving to another point here. Only for it to backfire on you? That is the danger of trying. That is the danger of trying to get results based on another person's do's and don'ts, rather than starting by praying to be filled with the knowledge of the will of God, understanding the spiritual reasoning behind that will, and executing it step by step for the desired result. So this is what we should do. We need to pray to be filled with the will of God. We need to understand the spiritual reasoning behind that will of God. And we need to now execute it step by step for the desired result. Rather than just looking for like something to copy and paste from someone else. So there is nothing wrong with following the advice of others, but there's a danger in going along just to get along. That was what Adam did, and we see that in Genesis chapter 3, when Adam, under the influence of his wife, chose to eat the wrong fruit, and we all know how that ended. You can do something because it appears wise, but it is a rotten fruit, full of maggots and decay, and you can't spit it out fast enough. What we saw with Adam was not the result of walking worthy of the Lord and fully pleasing Him, as Paul wrote in the lead verse, that is the ultimate goal of being filled with the knowledge of God's will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, so that we can fully please Him. Like Eve with Adam, apart from Adam, there's another example of King Saul. King Saul told David to use his hammer to fight Goliath, and we can see that in 1 Samuel chapter 17. That was how things work then. You just pick up this armor and you go fight. That was the way to go as far as the king was concerned. You should not go to war without the appropriate attire, without the appropriate gear. But that was not for David, and he gained victory over Goliath another way. So we've seen from Adam that just going along to get along, just doing something just because someone else has done it, is brings the wrong result. And here with King um, David had the brains, had the fortitude to say, King, I understand that that's what you've been doing, but that's not what I'm going to do. And the result was spectacular. He killed Goliath. He gained victory over Goliath, not in the way, not in the conventional way, so to speak. It was the same with Jesus on his way to the cross. So we've seen the story of Adam with Eve. Adam followed the advice of Eve. We've seen this. We've seen the story of David rejecting the compelling um, the compelling argument, the compelling reasoning of King Saul. And this was a king. The uh, the power dynamic was great here, and he wasn't just going to say, "Oh, he's a king. Let me not talk." He spoke out and did something different from whatever the king wanted him to do, and we can just see the result. So the result will show us. The result shows us that, oh, this was actually the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do to not wear that armor. It was a wrong thing to do to eat that fruit. Adam, I'm speaking about Adam now. It was the wrong thing to do to eat that fruit. But let's talk about Jesus. It was the same with Jesus on the way to the cross. It was filled with the knowledge of God's will for him to go to the cross. But not only that, he also knew the spiritual reasoning behind it. It's not that, again, I'm saying that it's not enough to just know the will of God, but to go behind that, go beneath that, and tap into the spiritual reasoning. So Jesus was fully on board, and he fully cooperated with the step-by-step process that led from being a baby born in a manger to a 3-year-old man hanging on the tree for the sins of the whole world. We can assuredly say that Jesus walked worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him. Peter was not filled with the knowledge of the will of God in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so he told Jesus to get the idea of going to the cross away from him. Get the idea from his mind. Now, let me read Matthew 6:20. Matthew 6:16-23. For he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me because you are not setting your mind on God's interest but on man's. So Jesus responded by saying that Peter was not aligned with the will of God, but with the will of man. Jesus told Peter, Get behind me, Satan, because Satan represents opposition to the will of God. Hence, the Bible says that the old world lies in the power of the evil one. 1 John 5:19 says, We know that we are from God, and the old world lies in the power of the evil one. Opposition to and rebellion against the will of God are everywhere. That's just what we see. So listen, what you are filled with is what you will produce. You cannot be filled with self-will or other people's wills and produce the will of God. As Jesus said, it is what comes out of a man that defiles a man. It's what you're already filled up with that will come out of you. And Jesus said, it is what comes out of a man that defiles a man. Matthew 15:11. What defiles a person is not what goes into the mouth, it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person. Just like I listed some things um, that defiles the individual. He said in Matthew 12:33, make the tree good, and the fruits will be good. Matthew 12:33. Make a tree good and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad and its fruits will be bad. For a tree is known by its fruit. Basically, it's what you are filled with that you will produce. We see Paul use the word filled in the previous focus verse and the word fully here in this focus verse. So he before he said he prayed that the people will be filled with the knowledge of God's will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding. Here is also talking about us fully pleasing God. He made it clear that we are to be filled with the knowledge of the will of God as a prerequisite to pleasing Him. So the word full and fully communicates degrees. What that tells me is that this is a lifelong pursuit to filled with the knowledge of the will of God, to fully please Him, which obviously connects one to the other. Being filled with the knowledge of the will of God, then fully pleasing Him, they are connected from the two verses. My conclusion is that this is a lifelong pursuit. We cannot rest on our laurels when it comes to walking worthy of the Lord and fully pleasing Him. There may be changes to be made daily, adjustments to be made as we go on the onward journey of fully pleasing God, but we must keep it at the forefront of our minds. Paul ties the knowledge of the will of God with growing in the knowledge of God, with the knowledge of God, pleasing Him and bearing fruit. We see that connection made here. The foundation is to be filled with the knowledge of the will of God in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, and we need to know what that means for our lives individually. Then we will fully please Him. Then we will bear fruit. These things will grow in His knowledge, will fully please Him, will bear fruit. These are not just words put on the pages of the Bible for decoration. These are important spiritual concepts. These are important things that Paul has taken his time to put down and explain. That this is vital. This is important. We're Christian, but that's the beginning of the journey. We now need to be filled with the knowledge of God's will. We need to continually be filled with the knowledge of God's will. Similarly, there's a danger in just trying to please Him. Just as there's a danger in focusing, there's a danger in focusing solely on bearing fruit rather than first and foremost being filled with the knowledge of His will. So that is, we see that tension in this, what we'll call a tension in this verse. Tension relating to bear, bear, bearing fruit in every good deed and growing in the knowledge of God. But these are connected. The point I'm making is that there could be a danger of focusing on one to the neglect of the other. There's a danger of focusing on just bearing fruit. Let's go work for God. Let's go for work for God, rather than first and foremost being filled with the knowledge of His will. And similarly, there's a danger in just trying to place Him based on, just focus on placing and just like prioritizing isolation. Focus on placing Him based on whatever idea we can come up with. So that's how people come up with idol worship. They say, oh, these are probably people that think they are sincere, that they think they are sincere, and they try to, I don't know, maybe dot all their I's and cross all their T's when it comes to seeking God. So they become creative and imaginative, um, because they're trying to focus on pleasing Him. And then we have idol worship. Maybe they think to themselves, okay, if what is needs to do, if what I need to do is bow down to this image, let me bow down to this image just because I'm trying to please Him. I'm coming up with my own idea of what pleases God. So with that is unhinged, that is cut off from the correct will of God, cut off from being filled with the knowledge of God's will, cut off from the right knowledge and understanding and wisdom and understanding from God. Without the foundation of being filled with the knowledge of His will. For example, um, there's an example here I will find in John 4:23. The time is coming and now is here when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father seeks such people to worship Him. Verse 24. For the Father seeks such people to be His worshippers. God is spirit, and the people who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. So we see the spirit here, that is the honestness, and the truth here. So to 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 remove the spirit from the truth is not the way of God or the will of God. To remove the heartfelt worship and remove it from what is true, and not just focus on let's it's just people will tell you it's the intention that matters. Whatever you do is okay. That is not what we see on the pages of the Bible. There's a truth, there is a knowledge, there's a right knowledge, there's a right will of God. And you need to pray that you be filled with the knowledge of God's will. Um, give you can't deputize somebody else to be filled with the knowledge of God's will for on your behalf. You can't give that as a contract, for example. You can't do that. You can't say and just say, let me just be sincere, whatever. You need to know what the truth is for yourself and pay the price to live in line with the truth. Another thing to note in this discussion is that God is knowable, and we can and should grow in His knowledge. Thank you for listening. God bless you.